About 80% of students say that they struggle memorizing idioms. And this is because you guys are using the wrong methods to memorize idioms. You're trying to memorize them the same way that you memorize vocabulary. But idioms and vocabulary are two separate things. So in this free masterclass, I'm going to show you exactly the methods you need to learn the different types of idioms, how to memorize them, how to use them, and also how to have the confidence to know which context to use them in. Enjoy. All right, my students, welcome to this free masterclass on how to memorize idioms. Now, we've had other mini courses, right, where I teach you idioms, but here you are also going to learn idioms. But besides that, as you can see, it's not only this, we have a lot to talk about. And don't worry, I'm going to break it down piece by piece for you so that we can really understand how we can memorize these different types of idioms, because there are different types of idioms with examples. And then I want you to stay till the end, because if you don't stay till the end, then you're not going to be able to learn how to memorize idioms. And remember, idioms make up is componen, right? About 30 to 40%, well, idioms and phrasal verbs. By the way, there are idioms, which are dichos, expresiones, modismos, right? Like the expressions people use. There are phrasal verbs, and we know what phrasal verbs are, right? Put out, turn off. And then there are phrasal idioms. That's something else. That's a combination of a phrasal verb and an idiom, but we're not going to talk about that right now. Right now, we're going to focus on the different types of idioms and why it's important to really understand them, because each of these have a different way of mastering them, a different way of how our brain processes it. And if you understand that, you understand that there should be a different learning approach for each and every one. So let's start with historical idioms, right? There's historical, there's compositional, non-compositional, and culturally derived idioms. By the way, this is something you will not find anywhere on the internet right now. You really have to go in deep in linguistic dissertations. So what we do is we go deep into dissertations, we go to books that are written by linguists. We take that and we simplify it. So this is like a simplified version of what the reality is. And there's a lot more. This is just the beginning, okay? So let's talk about historical idioms. What are historical idioms? Historical idioms come from historical events, situations, or even stories. That's simple, right? Now, how are they processed, right? They're hard to understand unless the background is known. Now, I have to clarify this. They're hard to understand if the background is not known for non-natives. Natives don't always need to know the history behind the idiom. In fact, if you go to a native and you ask them, hey, why did you use that idiom? It's a historical idiom, right? Yeah, it is. And I think it is. Okay, but why? And they're not going to be able to explain to you. The reason for this is they don't need to know it, because at such a young age, they're exposed to these idioms. And since they're exposed to these idioms at such a young age, their brain automatically knows exactly when and how to use it. But for non-natives, you watching this video, you have to know the history behind historical idioms if you really want to make sure that you remember it. It's important, and I'm going to show you a tip on how to do it. What's the learning tip? By the way, we're going to do this for each and every one, right? The description, the processing, a learning tip on how to learn it, and then several examples for you to really understand it, right? Okay, so a learning tip is to learn the historical story to connect with the idiom. But that's not enough. It's not enough to just know the history. You need to create an image that combines the history with the meaning and the context. And it can be a little difficult for some people. Some people can use ChatGPT. Some people don't have the time to do all this. So for example, in my course for my students, what we have is that we create these images and we put them in our live classes for our students. And our students are able to understand the history behind the idiom. So here, for example, we have strike while the iron is hot. And that means to take action while the opportunity is still favorable. So in the class, the student here, they get the vivid image, and we see that it combines the context, because it's a business English course. So it's a man in a suit, and it shows you him striking, which means to hit the iron. In this case, that's the iron, while it's still hot. And so we have to really think, like, what does that have to do with taking action while the opportunity is favorable? I don't get it. Well, that's why you have to understand, first of all, the historical background. So the idiom comes from a blacksmith. So a blacksmith is someone who creates swords, weapons made out of metal or different types of metal, striking a horseshoe, and we see it here happening, when the temperature of the metal was exactly right. So he had to strike it, he had to hit it to form it in the shape that he wanted. If not, if he waited till it got cold, then it was too late. He couldn't shape it in the right moment, right? So that's why to strike while the iron is hot means to take action while the opportunity is favorable. If you take too long, then it's too late. And if we go here, we have a scenario that can help you understand it. So your company is negotiating a partnership with a key client. The client shows interest, is someone that you can get as a client, but if you don't act quickly, their interest might cool off, like the metal. So acting immediately is a perfect example of striking while the iron is hot. And so then you go here, and then you have sentence examples. By the way, this is for my students. I'm showing you as an example what they get in their live classes, right? We need to strike while the iron is hot and close the deal before the client changes their mind. Boom. If we strike while the iron is hot, we can capitalize on the growing demand for our product. So now you understand exactly what's happening. You understand how to use it, the context, and that is exactly why it's important to create an image that combines the history, the meaning and context, scenario. And now when you look at strike while the iron is hot, you know that it means, well, it doesn't mean to face something difficult. That's the wrong definition. To act before it's too late. And so my students here in this, all right, so my students in their course, it's not enough to just know the history, to know the sentence examples. That's going to help you a lot to understand how to use it. But to really memorize it, my students, for example, in their course, they have access to an exclusive platform called the Vocab Tracker. It's a vocabulary tracker. So after their class, as you can see here, we have all these idioms from the classes that we've had from this month only. What do we see here? Strike while the iron is hot. You click it, and so when they click it, they can access the study material. So you have the text, they have the definition to take advantage of an opportunity as soon as it arises, when conditions are most favorable. They have the translation into their native language, aprovechar el momento, in this case it's Spanish. And then they have several sentence examples, like we saw, so they can study it, but that's not all. They also have several video examples this is called a vocabulary tracker. It's like a digital journal where we put all this information for them. They don't have to do anything. They just go in and they study. We want to make the learning process as easy as possible for the students. So they click the video, and what do they see? Oh, movie examples.
Strike while the iron is hot, dear.
In this case, I don't think you can hear it. But they can on their platform.
You must strike while the iron is hot.
If you strike,
so there they can see the pronunciation, the context, etc. So that's another way for them to memorize what they learn. They have their material in their live classes, and then they have their vocab tracker, and then it actually tracks their progress. So let's say they feel like they recognize it, they'll click, oh, recognize. Or maybe they feel familiar, or maybe they feel like they learned it. There's a difference between learning and recognizing. And we teach our students, we train our students on how to know the difference between these things. And your brain needs to know the difference. So let's say they recognize it, they save it, and then the platform here tracks their progress of that study. If we go here, we are able to find that they were able to study it. Strike while the iron is hot. As we can see here, hold on. Strike while the iron is hot. With the date, today's date is the 17th of October, and you recognize it. And then if you learn it, it shows you learned it this date. So this is very important to be able to really memorize idioms, right? So that's for historical idioms. Remember, that's not the only type of idiom. We have compositional idioms, non-compositional idioms, and we're going to talk about that right now. So if you want to take a little break, that's fine. But make sure you watch all of this if you really want to be able to dominate and master idioms, my students. So let's close this here, and let's go now to compositional idioms. What are compositional idioms? These are idioms where the literal words help explain the meaning. Remember, idioms are they're not metaphors. They're like cousins to metaphors. In fact, they're processed differently. Metaphors are processed in one way, whereas idioms are processed in a different way, according to certain studies that they've done. But compositional idioms are idioms where, by looking at the idiom, you can kind of understand, or you can kind of tell what the idiom means, especially if you see it in context. And this is not something you can do with all idioms. For example, we'll see with non-compositional idioms, even with context, it's a little bit confusing. But with compositional idioms, if you have the context, even sometimes without the context, you can kind of understand or discern, discernir, what the definition is by just looking at the idiom. So how is it processed? It's easier to figure out by understanding each word, all right? And I'll talk to you a little bit about how the brain processes it, because with these types of idioms, the brain doesn't no procesa cada palabra individualmente. So each individual word separately, like it does in a regular conversation. No, it processes it as a chunk, como un grupo, right? So let's look at a learning tip. Break down the parts of the idiom and relate it to real life situations. Again, context is going to help you, but that's not all. You want to create a vivid image that combines the meaning with the idiom. So the image is going to be kind of easy to understand. I have an example here for my students in my course, which they have access to. So we have the idiom, for example, clear as mud. And clear as mud, if you look at it, something that's clear, it means that you can understand it. But mud, is it clear? No. So there's a kind of a contradiction here, right? So you can kind of understand, okay, this has to do with meaning, but I'm not sure exactly what it means. But I can see that something is clear. Like when I say that's clear, right? So you can kind of understand the meaning just by looking at the idiom. But what does it mean? It's used sarcastically to describe something that is very confusing or unclear. So it's used sarcastically, right? And we have an image here of something that says clear as mud. It's connecting the idiom with mud, and the guy looks confused. So obviously it's not clear. So the image can help you to understand and procesar, what you're learning. And of course, sentence examples are important, right? His explanation was clear as mud. I'm more confused now than before. The instructions were clear as mud, so we had to ask for clarification. If the proposal is clear as mud, we need to clarify the details before proceeding. So we see that this is an example of what we call, not me, but experts, linguists call compositional idiom, right? And here are a few examples to spill the beans, which means to reveal a secret. You can kind of see you spill the beans, right? And even in its structure, en su estructura, it's very similar to the idiom. Spill the beans, reveal a secret. So that's a pattern that you'll see a lot with compositional idioms. Not all the time, but besides being able to determine the meaning by just looking at the idiom, they even are very similar grammatically or structurally, better yet. So spill the beans, reveal a secret. Now you can kind of see how spilling the beans means to reveal a secret. Because if you spill beans, it's like, oh, you ruined everything, right? Break the ice. That's another one, to start a conversation. So break the ice, start a conversation. it makes sense. It makes sense how break the ice means to start a conversation. These are compositional idioms. Set the ball rolling to start something, right? If you set the ball rolling, the ball starts rolling, you're ready to play the game, it means you're ready to start something. Hit the nail on the head. If you hit the nail on the head, pop, 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 you do it right, you're right when you do it, right? To keep an eye on, to watch closely. See, that's, you can determine keep an eye on. I'm not going to take my eye out and put it on the person that I'm, taking care of, or the dog or whatever. No, I'm watching them closely, and you can kind of determine that by its meaning. Compositional idioms, right? So far we've seen historical idioms, and we've seen compositional idioms. Very important. Now we're going to take a look at non-compositional idioms. Let's go ahead and put this here. Let's go ahead and put this here. Non-compositional idioms are idioms where the meaning is not clear from the words. And these are going to be harder to understand because it requires a lot of memorization. All idioms require memorization, but this one specifically will require you to put extra effort. But at least you know, oh wait, these are non-compositional. I got to put extra effort. And by the way, from what I know, at the moment, there is no course, no YouTube video, no Instagram video that will separate these idioms for you. None. From what I know, we're the only ones that do it at the moment. So if you can find this online, congratulations, let me know. But at the moment, we're the only course who does this for our students. And so you need to know, are these compositional, are these non-compositional? And a learning tip here is it's going to require a lot more effort on your part, but mainly on your teacher's part, because your teacher should be doing a lot of the leg work. What do you think that means? Leg work. A lot of the work when it comes to helping you memorize these idioms. You shouldn't be doing it by yourself. If you have a teacher, they shouldn't just be giving you a list of idioms and expecting you to memorize it. No. Okay, so here you can use flashcards. You know, the cards that on one side have the idiom and on the other side they have the meaning, or even an image, right? Those are important. But what's going to require is a lot of exposure and repetition. And let me change my camera for this. The reason I say this, a lot of exposure and repetition, my students, is because many linguists who study the brain, who study language and the connection between the brain and language. I apologize for these curtains, they look terrible. I'm gonna get it fixed, but I have a dog and the dog likes to play around, so, and then plus anytime we move it. Anyway, so I just hope it's not distracting. That's it, that's much better. Let's put this here. Okay, good. All right. So what scientists have seen was that in the brain, I should probably show you an example before I start talking scientifically, right? Let me show you the examples. So kick the bucket means to die, right? Can you see a connection between kicking a bucket and dying? No. There is absolutely no connection. As we see here, for example, in compositional idioms, the examples here, spill the beans, a little bit to reveal a secret. There's a bit of a connection. Break the ice. There's a bit of a connection with break the ice and starting a conversation. There's a bit of a connection between set the ball rolling and starting something. And there's a bit of a connection between hitting the nail on the head, keeping an eye on, etc. But when it comes to kick the bucket, can you really connect that to die? No. If someone told you, oh yeah, he kicked the bucket, what does that mean? Oh, he died. Oh, not mind you, by the way, it's also not used all the time. People don't use kick the bucket in normal conversations. You wouldn't say, oh, my dad kicked the bucket yesterday. No, he passed away. He left us. He passed. He's gone. Whatever. Kick the bucket, it's got a humorous flavor to it, a counter expectational, a sort of detachment to the person you're speaking about. So you need to know all of this when you learn this idiom. And it's interesting how for a native, the phrase kick the bucket, right? In his brain, it's right next to the part of his brain where dying is. In fact, studies have shown that a native, when he hears kick the bucket, he processes it faster than when he hears to die. He died. He kicked the bucket. Because kick the bucket, it's already stored there. They just have to, it's right next to die. Whereas to die, the brain has to process to and has to process die separately. Here, the brain does something else. The brain actually doesn't have to search for the meaning because they already know the meaning for a native. For a non-native, again, a lot of repetition. You want to get to the point where kick the bucket is in your brain right next to die. In your brain, right next to it. So here's to kick a bucket, here's to die. So that when someone uses it or you want to use it, you have it right there with you. But for that, you need methods. In our course, we use 40 different methods to help our students to be able to memorize these phrasal verbs, these idioms, etc. Great. So that's non-compositional. Now, for culturally derived idioms, these are idioms that have to do with culture. And here's the thing. It's much like historical idioms. These are very similar to historical idioms. It can be unclear if you don't know the culture or region behind it. Again, natives don't need to understand the culture behind it. It's cool if they know it. Sometimes they will. Sometimes they will just because they understand. Generally speaking, they know about culture, their own culture. But for you, you need to be able to store it in your brain nice and neat, right? To be able to understand the meaning. And you want to connect the idiom with the cultural practice or references. And you can create an image that combines the literal meaning with the cultural past. Very important for you to be able to do that. So for cultural idioms, you want to treat them exactly like historical idioms, right? Create the image to combine the literal meaning with the cultural past. And again, natives don't have to do this, but you do. And here are a few. When in Rome, do as Romans do, right? Interestingly, there are some idioms where you don't have to say all of them. So for example, you could just say when in Rome. And people already know that it means do as the Romans do, which means follow the local customs, right? You want to do what people do around you, right? If you're in Tennessee, people are doing this, you want to do that. Example, right? You want to be able to respect their customs. So, and it's got a more nuanced meaning than that. It's not only that, there's people use it in different ways. But now that you understand that there are different types of idioms, historical idioms, right? We have compositional idioms, non-compositional idioms, cultural derived idioms. Again, you can go and do this by yourself. You can research them. There's no one on the internet who's talking about this, but you can go and look for historical idioms and learn them, learn the history behind them, learn about the culturally derived idioms. You're going to have some trouble finding what are compositional idioms or non-compositional idioms. You can do it by yourself, or you can click the link down below. And if you click the link down below, my students, you can schedule a free call with me. If you qualify, then I'm going to tell you, if you don't qualify for my course, I'm not going to try to convince you to join it, right? This course is not for everyone, right? So this course is going to help you students to using our material, using our vocab tracker to track your progress. We guarantee that you'll be able to master idioms, phrasal verbs, grammar, structure, pronunciation, with live classes, with our community, with our native teachers from different parts of the US. So if you're at least intermediate, upper intermediate, or advanced, and you need these idioms for business reasons, it's a business English course, but you also need it for personal reasons, click the link down below, schedule a call, and then we'll see if we can help. That's all for now, and I'll see you next time.